name's Ed, and I am an addict. Hey, family. And tonight I think you're in for a real treat. You know, one of the things that I craved for many, many years, and I finally found it in Narcotics Anonymous, was people that believed in issues like I believed in issues and was willing to stand up for those issues like unity and commitment and trust. And tonight I met Greg back in 1978 in the Denny's off of 285 there out in metro Atlanta. And he pointed out a paragraph in the Little White Book that has since become a very touching paragraph for me and a bunch of y'all. And kind of set the tone for the relationship we would build. And it's been a very good relationship for me. With that, I'll give you Greg P. from Marietta, Georgia.
All right. My name's Greg. I'm an addict. Can we take another moment of silent meditation? I'm real glad to be here. I feel like that this is a dream come true for a few people, probably a bunch of you. And my recovery's been a story of dreams come true. My experience in Narcotics Anonymous has been a story of dreams come true. And it's real exciting to me to see this sort of thing happen. I've been privileged to be involved in a lot of firsts. First conventions, first committee meetings. And it's real exciting because it reinforces and it reestablishes this thing that I bet my life on, that there really is something here, that there really is something going, and it reinstills my faith in my God in this program. It's a tremendous sort of thing. I feel that here tonight. I've known some of you a while, and I know that things like this have been a dream. And our dreams can come true. We dreamed about a lot of things when I first came around, and there weren't a whole lot of people. There were probably 20 NA meetings in the world, and maybe 200 members, tops. There was no Saturday night meeting, and we dreamed about things like this. And to look out and see a gang of people learning how to live and enjoy life, learning how to be real people, just really shakes me, all the way down. I feel real privileged and real proud to be a part of Narcotics Anonymous. This is my life. I'm not going to talk a lot about my using because it's real dull and boring, and all I did was use. I never was arrested. I never got hospitalized. I never was in treatment. I never did an armed robbery. What else? I never did any of those things that you see on TV. I just used. And I started when I was, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I got all done when I was 23. And I started looking for help about a year before then. And I did all the things we do. I was the guy that was always driving up to the Connections house and seeing all the strange cars in the driveway and saying, I'm going to go on plan B tonight. I don't know why. I remember the feelings, though. I started looking for help in about 1969. And one of the things that became real strongly impressed on me was that there was no place to go. There was no help for addicts. Addicts did not recover, and no one gave a damn about us. I tried to get into Synanon, but they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a criminal record. I tried this, I tried that, I tried going to church, I tried getting married, I tried going to a psychologist, and nothing worked. You know, and I remember that desperation because my using had gotten to the point where I hated myself a little bit more. Probably the best description of the way it was that last year or so of my using. And it's a scene that I'm sure many of you know well. Sitting in the bathroom backwards on the toilet, you've been missing, you're sick, you got blood running down your arms and you're crying. And you're saying, how'd I get here? This is not how it was supposed to turn out. This is not what I had planned. And that hopelessness that we feel that ties us together. There are a lot of things that tie us together, the ties that bind us together. That desperation, that loneliness, the loneliness only an addict knows, that self-hate, that hopelessness. To me, those are the things that really tie us together. As we get together in groups, we have the traditions, and we have this, and we have that, and the other thing. But when I can sit down or come face to face with one of you, where we touch is in the misery, and we touch in the pain. And then I hope we continue to touch, but that shifts to the joy and the life. Probably the most exciting thing in the world is to see the death go out of someone's eyes. And I watch newcomers and I watch them come in with the death in their eyes. Most of you know what that looks like and know what that feels like. And down the road of peace, there's a spark, and it flickers kind of. And then after a while they shine, and they're alive again. And that makes it all worthwhile. It makes it all worthwhile. I came to the program and I went through all the things we go through. I went through all those times. I came to my first meeting in a three-piece black suit, tie, shoes. I spent all afternoon getting ready. I'd started calling the helplines and the hotlines around Los Angeles a little earlier, and there really wasn't any place that I could find. But finally somebody said, I don't know, I think it was a suicide line or something like that. I was calling everybody. If the number was on the radio and they were saying you could get help, I was calling. Someone said, are you eligible for Narcotics Anonymous? And, I don't know, what do you have to be? He said, well, we don't know either, but here's the phone number. And I called this man. See, I am here because of service. One of the things I don't talk about when I share very often is service. But every single one of us is here because of someone's service, because of someone's willingness to reach out and let others know we exist, because of someone's willingness to pick up the phone, because of someone's willingness to go into a jail or a prison. Okay? How far up do you want it? Can't hear me in the back? Okay, it was feeding back a second ago, so I moved off of it. Is that better? Okay, wonderful. We work well together, don't we?
Take two.
Take two?
Yeah, start all over.
Start all over. My name's Greg. I'm an addict. That doesn't so much tell you what I did, but it tells you who I am and what I'm made of. Is that starting over okay? All right. Obviously, I lost where I was entirely.
Mr. Rewind?
I was calling the hotline? Nah, yeah, no, that was 16 years ago. Shit. You see, this is what it used to be like. It used to be like this all the time. What I was talking about is service, because I don't talk about it enough, and the fact that we're all here because of someone's service efforts. So when someone asks you to do something, remember that your life is a result of someone's service. I am for service. I am not for getting addicted to it, but I am for service. I came around the program, and I was scared. You know, I didn't want you to know who I was. I was afraid I was going to get busted. I was afraid that I'd be rejected. I didn't know, you know, addicts? Oh. You know, I'd heard about addicts, and I didn't fit the stereotype. You know, I thought addicts were people running around, raping nuns, beating up little old ladies and taking their quarters, you know, sticking guns in people's faces and up their noses. You know, I had read all the horror stories about addicts, and I didn't fit in. You know, I was just, you know, a kid who used drugs every day, couldn't stop, and hated himself. You know, I came into the meeting, and I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys who was at that first meeting shared with me, and he told me a little story about that first meeting, and I was probably the first or second person that had ever worn a suit to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And about half the people there thought I was a narc. So nobody talked to me. There was a lot of fear and a lot of anger in Narcotics Anonymous in those days. The fellowship was coming primarily out of the penal system. We were all real shut down emotionally. I'm grateful that that's changed. You know, I'm grateful you can go into a room today like this and feel the love. You know, if we each take the time, we could feel it. Unfortunately, we don't always take the time. I came to that meeting. It was on a Thursday night. I'd had my last fix on Monday. I used the following Sunday behind a lack of sleep because I hadn't slept since Monday either. I used 1 week to the day after that, and that was behind 12-step work. It was around a week, and I'd already doing 12-step work. I went and called on one of my old using partners and told him how great it was. Took him to the meeting, gave him a white booklet, that's all we had. And, you know, patted him on the back and said, "Well, isn't it great? I found this thing you never have to use again. It's wonderful, you know." And he went to a meeting and he said, "This is bullshit. I'm going to go get fucked up." And I bought and we used my outfit. You know, so, you know, that's a typical story. I got so sick. I immediately went into, you know, trash fever, shaking, you know, dry heaves, the whole bit. My muscles, my joints locked up again. You know, just like I just went right back into withdrawals instantly. And, you know, I never want to forget that. That was the last time I used anything. I would have been worried before that about your accepting me. I'd been worried about, you know, whether I fit in. See, because I hadn't have this terrible war story or anything. After that, I didn't care whether you accepted me. You know, I was here. That was my chair, and I'd fight you for it. You know, there was a man who said, when you come into the rooms, you pick yourself out a chair, and from then on, that's your chair. And you have to stand up and commit yourself to keep that chair. And you have to fight for it. And you fight for it in the room, but most of all, you fight for it outside the room. You fight for it in your daily life. You fight for it when every ounce of you says, "Let's go, let's run, let's use," you know, and you say, "No, not today." You know, the biggest battle of them all. I went through all the things following that we seem to go through. At 90 days, I knew all the words and I was fixed. I could repeat anything in the white booklet. I could quote it because I memorized it. You know, I see us going through that. It's almost like, you know, when we were little tiny kids and you know, we're sitting on the potty and, you know, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, I'm through." You know, it's the same sort of thing. I was through. But I kept going to meetings. The answers that worked right in the beginning, the reaching out to people, the not being afraid to ask for help, the reading of the literature. You know, there wasn't much to read then. The getting up in meetings, the sitting in the front row instead of the back row. saying something when you're called on. All those things that worked for me in the beginning are the things that have always worked for me. When I was backed into a corner, the basics have always carried me through. I forgot that along the way several times. I forgot about the basics. I ended up crazy, thinking about all kinds of things, thinking about suicide, thinking about using, thinking about whatever. But the basics always work. I went to over 500 meetings my first year, and virtually everyone I know who has been clean for any length of time started out going to meetings daily. There are a few exceptions. If you're new, go to meetings every day. Make this your life. Do the basics. Do the things that this program teaches us to do. Then you got a shot at it. At 6 months, my life was still all messed up. I was crazy again. Oh my God, I knew I was sick, but I had no idea. I thought it was the drugs. I could have sworn in the beginning that first step said powerless over heroin. I could have swore that. But it doesn't. It says powerless over addiction. The drugs started leaving my system and what I have left. I love that line. Take the drugs away from a drug-crazed maniac. What do you have, a more efficient maniac? I identify with that. I identified with a lot of weird stuff in the beginning. Probably one of the weirdest things I identified with was a dead fly in a Sparklets bottle. And I figured out, just to show you where I come from and what kind of shape I was in when I got here, I figured that fly had to have flown down in that bottle. The neck was about that big around, fly down that neck. And he'd flying around the bottle there. And he'd bang into the wall, and he'd fly, no, that's not it. And he'd fly over here, bang. And he'd fly over there, bang. And every time he starts getting towards the neck, he starts hitting more often because it gets narrower. He's going bang, bang, bang. No, this can't be the right way. Bang, bang, bang. So he flies the other way until he dies. In reality, that fly had the ability to get out of that bottle. All he had to do was stop flying and walk out up the side. That's how I felt. I felt like I'd been flying around in that bottle, banging my head against the wall. And every time I started getting closer and closer to a solution, I started banging my head more and more and more. It got painful. So I went the other way. I did a lot of substitution in my first few years around here. I gained 180 pounds. I got obsessed with sex. I got obsessed with working. I got obsessed with cars. I got obsessed with this. I got obsessed with that. I've been strung out on so many things clean, that there is more wreckage from that today than there is from my using. I mean, my obsessions and my expression of my addictive personality has kicked my fanny so much more than using. Staying clean hasn't been any big deal, to tell you the honest truth. If I look back at it, it was tough in the beginning, staying clean. But looking back on the years, it's not been anywhere near as hard as I expected. Most days, I don't even think about using. I don't go to the mall and look for addicts or people who are loaded. I mean, my whole life and thinking is no longer centered in drugs in one form or another, the getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. I get obsessed with other things. I get obsessed with things that seem to be less threatening, but in fact back me into that same corner. That corner of fear, that corner of desperation, that corner of loneliness. That's been more my pattern since I got here. I want to talk a bunch about the first step because part of my growth in the recent past has been centered around the first step. I've come to believe that there's absolutely nothing external about the first step. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction. Addiction only exists for me in here. It's a threefold disease. It's physical, it's mental, and it's spiritual. All those things exist in me. I used to think I was powerless over people, places, and things. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that what I'm truly powerless over, is my distorted responses to people, places, and things. The way I respond, the way I react. I'm the type of person you walk up and say, "Hi, Greg," and I say, "Fuck yourself." On a bad day, that's sometimes my instant reaction. Or someone will walk up and say, "Hi, Greg," and I'll say, "They don't like me." Or I'll walk into a room and people will be talking and I'll just know they're talking bad about me. All those things are part of what's within me, part of what I'm truly powerless over. I'm so grateful our first step says we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, because that instantly puts the focus on the disease rather than an external thing, rather than something that exists outside of me. I mean, I can exert power over this book. I could throw it across the room. I could exert power over people. I could punch you. You can punch me back. But I could punch you. I'm not powerless over people, places, and things. I'm not powerless over this place. I can walk through that door. But what I'm powerless over is what goes on in Greg. I knew that on a physical level even before I got here. Oh, I didn't know the details and the stuff they talk about now about the hypothalamus and the gamma-lipotropins or whatever, and the keflins and all that stuff. I know that stuff. It's real interesting. But we didn't know any of that stuff when I came around. We knew that somehow the drugs acted differently in our body. And the first evidence I have of that one is when I was, that tall and I had my tonsils out. And they gave me a tranquilizer before they put me asleep, and I got real hyper and Indian wrestled with the nurse. Even then, the drugs didn't seem to act the same way in my body. And I can remember those times when I was off into my using, when, we'd all cop and we'd all, run around the room and get loaded together, and they'd all be saying, "Oh, this is great," and I'll be saying it's bunk, or vice versa. I'd take a hit and go out, and they're saying, "We're going to kill that sucker that sold this to us." I don't know why those things happened. I know that when I used, something happened. I believe probably the biggest difference between an addict and a non-addict is a non-addict's going to stop using if they have a good reason. Us, hell, we'll continue to use in the face of all the best reasons in the world to stop up. I had all kinds of reasons to stop using. I had all kinds of reasons, but I never did. I knew long before I crawled in the doors, that this shit was no good for me. I knew a long time before I crawled in the doors that my life was fucked up. I knew a long time before I got here, that I was strung out and couldn't stop, because I'd been trying to for a long time. I knew that. One of the neatest things I've heard about the first step is that it doesn't ask us to accept anything weird or theoretical, that all we have to believe is the experience of our lives. If we can stop denying our history, our experience, then the first step is obvious. The second part of the disease that I look at is the mental aspect, and to me, at the most basic, that's my addictive personality, the fact that I will take anything. And I'll get strung out on it to the point where it's self-destructive. I will take anything that takes me away from Greg and my self-hate and my pain, and I will focus on it to the point where I'm having problems. I've been pulled over for drunk with years clean, behind obsession, behind lack of sleep. Reading was one of the things I got into. And it's all right to sit up all night and read a book, but when you're doing it 3 and 4 and 5 nights in a row and you're falling asleep behind the wheel of your car on the way to work, that's not normal. Just one more chapter. I promise I'll put it down as soon as I finish this chapter. Who did I think I was promising? I mean, that's the nature of my addictive personality. Or driving round and round and round and round the block to look at the same gal walking down the street. That's the nature of my addictive personality. Or living in this fantasy world that goes on between my ears. It's real strange what goes on in this mental process of mine. It's a lot like Monty Python. And I had to learn not to trust all the stuff that goes on in me. I had to learn not to trust my thoughts. I had to learn not to trust my feelings. We have sayings about that. It's like our best ideas got us here and that. My best ideas did get me here, thank God. I started looking for help. Some of the other things since I've been here, some of my great ideas I've gotten hooked into, and they've created most of my pain. I believe the bulk of our pain comes from living in contradiction. When we're violating what we believe is right and wrong, when we're violating our morals, most of our pain comes directly from that. I had to learn to watch what went on in my head, kind of like a movie, to become a third person to my insanity. I had to not treat my feelings so seriously. Maybe the wisest thing anyone ever told me was, hey, Greg, don't take yourself so damn seriously. Because, paranoia, false fear, I was full of it. Because I'll get a feeling, and it'll have no relationship with reality. Thoughts aren't things. But whether or not the situation calls for the feeling, I find out most of the time it doesn't, because my feelings are clouded by the experience of a lifetime. And the best way I can relate how to do that, I think, is like, I remember those acid trips. When all I had left was, don't forget you took something. It's the drugs. This isn't real. Don't forget. And he kept repeating it over and over and over and over. And that was all you had left to hold on to reality with. I do that with my head. Greg, it ain't necessarily so. Just because you think so doesn't make it so. And I say that to myself over and over and over again. And Monty Python kind of gets blurry if I say it enough. And I don't have to buy into that insanity. And I don't have to buy into those desperate feelings. That's all part of my disease of addiction. On a spiritual level, I believe our disease focuses itself on self-obsession. Sure, it's lack of faith, lack of hope, lack of trust, and all those things. But the self-obsession is what kicks my butt. The fact that you put me in a room with another human being and I immediately got a problem because I don't know who to be, I don't know how to ask, and I don't know how to act, and I don't know how to say the right thing, and I don't know how to be a real person, and I get all flustered because of that, and I try to figure out who I think you want me to be. And I got to remember that all that stuff, everything that I think, gets filtered through my thinker, and my thinker's broke. And 1 + 1 = 5 more times than not. If I can remember that, I got a chance. My feelings, my thoughts, that part of me that thinks that I am the center of the universe, and I think we all have that. That infantile 2 or 3 year old thing that it seemed like we never grew out of successfully, that we never completed and we got stuck in down the road. I carry that with me. I've learned not to pay so much attention to it. How do we deal with thoughts and feelings? Well, I get the hell out of the way. I don't know about you. I try not to give them so much power. I found out if I take that feeling and I go, nice feeling, oh, I love you, I get in trouble. But I tend to do that. I want to nurture and feed and take good care of my insanity because it's familiar. Because it's something that I know I can cope with that insanity. Man, I did that for all my life before I got here, and a lot of my life since I got here. I believe that serenity is the absence of self-obsession. And the fleeting bits and pieces we get of that in the beginning are a promise of things to come. I still carry all those things. I still have those basic instincts that are distorted somehow, but I've learned not to give them so much power. And through not giving them so much power, they don't seem to consume me as much. Instead of getting caught in those things and that lasting for days or weeks, I may get caught in them for moments. I came into the convention last night about 11:30, and I was gone. I wasn't here yet. You know, most of us seem to experience that when we come into a convention is a good example. It takes a while for our emotions and and all our stuff to catch up with our bodies. Our bodies get here, and it takes a while before we're here. It's kind of like in the morning. You know, my head's gone. To me, that's all first step stuff. I have more and more trouble separating the steps today. When I try and talk about one step, all the other steps go because I don't believe you work the first step and then you go on to the second step and then you go on to the third. I believe you work the first step and you add the second step and work 1 and 2. And then you add the third step and work 1, 2, and 3. It's kind of like juggling. And the more practice you get, you can add more and more balls. You know, I'm real glad the balls run out at 12. God gave us time to keep everything from happening at once, but you know, the second step to me is the answer to the first step. You know, the old thing on the 1, 2, and 3 is I can't, he can, so I think I'll let him. You know, I don't know about that because in the beginning for me it was I can't, we can. So I think I'll do what I'm told. Now I believe that what it is identifying the problem, identifying the solution, and putting the solution into action. Making a commitment to the solution, betting your ass on the solution. Because I think that's what it takes. I rubber stamped the second step first time through. I said, I got it. What's next? I really believe the process of coming to believe took me a tremendous length of time. I can remember with 2 months clean to the day, sitting in a room crying because I recognized that I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe I could make it. I didn't believe in Greg. I didn't believe in any God. I didn't really believe in this program. And I had nothing to believe in. I think that was the beginning of this thing we call an awakening of the spirit. When I realized there was no spirit in me, that had died too. That had gone, that had been used up when I came in feeling all used up. The second steps become real important to me. You know, coming to believe in something, in anything. And at first it was Narcotics Anonymous. My first concept of was a higher power was coming in rooms, you know, a lot smaller than this. And you had a magic. I identified with you. I could tell you were addicts just like me. I could tell that you couldn't stay clean either because you said so. And I watched you go and come and go and come. But there were people staying clean. And I didn't know what was keeping them clean, but that was my first higher power. And I came to believe that there was something going on here, above and beyond anything I had ever experienced. And I came to believe that that something that was going on here could restore me to sanity. So whatever it was that was keeping you clean, I wanted it. I wanted it. And I made that my higher power. And that worked for me in the beginning. My concept of a higher power has evolved a lot since then. You know, today I have a personal God. It's not the God I grew up with, but it's a God that I believe in and a God that I trust. And a God that when the chips are down, I know is always with me. There's a small, warm point of energy in me that I can always find if I look for it. I believe that's the point at which my God and I make contact. That's a special, special thing to me. And I feel weird sharing about that, but that's where it's at for me. I honestly believe, looking back, that I made, as far as my recovery goes, the transition between the first step and the beginning of the second step at somewhere just before 5 years. It seems like we have to work at these things for a while before they bear fruit. There seem to be some patterns in our recovery that are very, very similar. You know, I talked about the 90-day wonder, and I talked about the 6-month. You know, we all know about the birthday crazies. You know, right before your birthday, oh my God, if I make it, then I've committed myself and I have to do it for real. Or right after the birthday when you're going, I'm through. Boy, I made it. Shh, now I can relax. We've experienced that. You've watched people go through that. We relapse because of that. We die because of that. I went through the stuff, at the end of the first year where, I wasn't getting any attention anymore. We had chips when I came around too. They're great. Well, I got pat. You're doing so. Oh, hey. But I got my birthday, and 8-9 months down the road, I hadn't been getting any strokes. I wasn't a newcomer anymore, and I'm going, oh, this is boring. Is this all there is? The answer is no, but that's what I went through. And I considered saying, what can I do for excitement? Found out one of the things I could do for excitement was work the steps. If you have any reservations about working the steps, that's okay. You're entitled to your misery. Don't work them as long as you can stand it. If you don't want to do this thing, don't do it. It's your life. I'm going to do it for me. I have to. That's a must for me. I have to do it this way. Because my way didn't work. God knows I tried it as long as I could. My way does not work. If I think of it, the light bulb goes on my head, the first thing I have to do if I'm following my program is unscrew the light bulb. Because that which it is illuminating is not spiritual. It's my self-obsession. It's my self-will. I learned that. I went through the thing at between 2.5 and 3.5 years where I became devastatingly aware of my spiritual illness. It was at that point, again, oh my God, I knew I was sick, but I had no idea. But I became aware that I am addiction. Addiction isn't something I have. It's something I am. And that it embodies every cell in me. That it is all of me. That this is me. And I was overwhelmed. I see a lot of us relapse around 3 years. And I think the realization of the true nature of the foundations of our disease is overpowering to us. I think it blows us away. Watch people. Give them a lot of love when they're in that period. The thing that happened to me between 4 and 6 years, that in-depth, devastating awareness of the unmanageability of my life, is something we seem to go through. I see a lot of people in this fellowship, some of the old-timers in communities like this, going through that now. I sat in a corner, figuratively. I had tried everything I could think of. I'd done all the things you taught me. I'd written, I'd talked to my sponsor, I'd shared in meetings. I'd gone to church even. I'd gotten pretty radical. I was doing things that, any length stuff, and nothing worked. And I had to be there in that corner that I knew I couldn't get out of clean. And the answer was, this God shit that everybody's talking about, it better be for real or I'm fucked. That's what it had come to. I see that happening to a lot of us. It was that point where I had to turn over my recovery, and I could no longer fix myself with Narcotics Anonymous. That I had to depend on a power greater than myself. I was forced to, because my way, even in recovery, even the way you taught me, stopped working. And I went through the major life changes that I see us going through, 8 to 10 years. I see a pattern there. I see a pattern post 10 years. For me, it was right around 12 years. I haven't seen enough people go through that to pin it down. I've seen enough to know that something goes on there. But again, there were major changes in my life. Probably one of the most difficult years of my recovery was my 11th year. I lost self-respect. I lost any sense of self-worth. I experienced some real failure. Up until that, I had my ups and downs, but basically everything I touched turned to gold. All I had to do was stay clean and act right. And everything's great. But I found myself in a situation where all this slick stuff that I'd learned and gotten clean wasn't cutting it again. And I had major changes in my life at that point, too. And one more time, I had to step out on faith. What got me through those periods were the basics. Because I was taught the basics when I first came around. I was taught to claim my place in Narcotics Anonymous and stand up and talk about what I believed in and put my ass on the line. I was taught to go to meetings regularly. I was taught to utilize the literature. I was taught to share. I was taught to have a sponsor and use a sponsor. I was taught that I needed relationships. We had a relationships workshop today that talking to Casey, she approached that in a way I really liked, because I don't think the point is love affairs of relationships. I think we need relationships. Every single step is based on cultivating and developing a new relationship with yourself, with what you believe in, with your sponsor, with the people in your past, with society. Every single step is based on developing relationships. And you damn well better have some relationships when you get here. The first one is called honesty, and that's a relationship with self. You need a relationship with a sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor and are afraid to get one. You're entitled to your misery as long as you can stand it. Don't do it. Don't go up and ask anybody for help. I know how tough that is. The hardest thing that I remember from my using days, the most degrading thing that I remember having to do was ask a friend for help. I was at Monterey Pop Festival, and I'd taken a bunch of PCP, and I was just fucked up, man, and I couldn't find my car or the exit. And people were starting to disappear, and I finally had to go up to somebody that I recognized, and I had to say, help me. Now, I'm not very good at saying help me. I don't think any of us, because we carry that bullshit thing, I got it together, I can handle it, that pride. And that's what's so tough about the first step, because it asks us to give up the two things that are the most important in our life. Number one, the only thing that ever made any sense to us, the only thing we ever truly loved, and that was our using. And number two, that thing we had the most pride in, the only thing we had left was that I got it together. I can handle it. And the first step says, no. You have to admit that that's bullshit. That you're powerless over your addiction. That your life has become unmanageable. And the second step provides an answer to that. It says an answer is in a power greater than ourselves. And the third step says we made a decision. To me, that means commitment. To me, that means action. I believe that the word decision implies action. That until you take some positive action, it's just a goddamn pipe dream like they all were. It's a notion. Action. I believe that the steps are an action program. I believe that there are actions that are implicit with every step. That carried me for a while when I made that commitment. Of course, part of that commitment was to continue this process. In some ways, the third step is a lot like promising yourself to work 4 through 12. That's a commitment to continue down this path. I hate inventories. They are time-consuming. Often they stir up painful things. I don't want to learn that much about myself, but I do them. I do them because I like the results. I like the freedom I get. I like that sense of belonging in the world. I like that sense of not having 10,000 pounds on my shoulders. If you don't want to write an inventory, don't write one. It's okay. You're entitled to your misery as long as you can stand it. For God's sakes, don't you dare share that with anyone. You are entitled to your misery for as long as you can stand it. And you know, I've been saying that a lot, and that's because we downplay some things. One of the things I think we really downplay is that this program teaches us that what it gives us is a choice. We downplay that a lot. We assume that the choice is already made. We assume that the answer is recovery. I'm sorry. There are two sides to that choice, and we have a right to reject recovery. I hate to say that, but the people who do that have the right. And to take away the right to reject recovery, I believe, is equal to taking away the right to choose recovery. Without the choice, the program doesn't work. Without the commitment, without that thing that happens way down deep inside us, this doesn't work. The program, the steps, recovery is not an intellectual exercise. It's a gut-wrenching awakening to a new way of life. It's not forced on us by externals. It's forced on us by internals, by that thing we're truly powerless over. The stuff that happens in us. The fifth step was real important to me. I was scared to death. The first time I wrote an inventory and took a fifth step, there was an event that I described in detail on that inventory that never happened. I needed to impress the man with whom I was taking my fifth step. So I went to great lengths to describe this situation that never happened. I'm real thankful that I was given the courage to tell him that that was a lie when I was reading that inventory to him. Because I think that if I hadn't found that courage and taken that risk, I would have had to live that. Be real careful what you put in your inventories. This is a spiritual program. Don't fuck around with the spirit. It will get you. If you don't believe it, try. As long as you can stand it. I look at 6 and 7 a little differently than a lot of people look at them. This works for me. I don't know if it works for anyone else. I relate 6 and 7 to the Serenity Prayer. I believe that our shortcomings are the way our defects manifest in the real world. The word defect to me implies defective, broken, bad parts. Won't run. The word shortcoming to me implies that we fell short, that we came up short, that we had the potential to do better. That's to me in the actions. I look at my defects, it's those instantaneous, distorted, warped reactions, motivations, drives, whatever you want to call them. And the shortcoming being the physical ways we actually carry that out. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I can't change my instant reactions. There are things and words and situations that trigger things in me, and I can't change that trigger. I do have some degree of choice over my actions. The courage to change the things I can. My 7th step prayer is, God, grant me the strength and the courage to live beyond my defects, not to live in the problem. We have a saying talking about stop living in the problem, start living in the solution, or something like that. To me, that relates directly to 6 and 7. To me, that's a package. Through disuse, through God's intervention in giving me the strength and the courage not to take the actions that feed and distort and put me into all this insanity that my defects would have me in, they lose power. They lose the ability to control my life so much. I find it's not necessary for me, if I'm angry at you, to punch you. I can stick my hands in my pockets And it's tough to punch you with my hands in my pockets. When I go into a store and I see that little thing on the shelf that I want, I put my hands in my pockets because it's tough to pick it up with my teeth, and embarrassing too. It's tough to use with your hands in your pocket. You know, you ever tried to cook up some stuff with your hands in your pockets? It's tough, man. Take the top off a bottle. You know, you can't hold it with nothing. I mean, I guess you could do it with your knees and your teeth, but God, if anybody was around, you'd look silly. You know, those actions, God gives me the strength not to repeat the same mistakes, not to take the actions that my distorted instincts would have me take. 8 and 9, those are another set of steps that I suggest you don't do. As long as you can stand it. We made a list of all people we had harmed. You know how many people forget or don't make a list? I didn't make a list. Not at first. I just figured, well, hell, I'll just see who I screw over. Okay, I'll go talk to him. Tells me I got to make a list. Now, I believe in writing the steps. I believe there's a job to do with each step. There are actions that are implied by each step, one of which is writing. The only way I can really get clarity is on paper. It's easy for me to say something and then say, oh, I didn't really quite mean the way you heard. But if it's down there on paper, it's real tough to deny. There are actions implicit in each step. The action for me of the 8th step is actually physically writing that down. To do that. To be honest. To search myself. I think that's where people slip up the most. That and the idea that we make this list of people we have harmed for them. Now that ties into the 9th step too. We make that list for us. We make that list for us. 8 and 9 don't have anything to do with those people out there that we harmed. They have something to do with freeing us from ourselves. It's kind of like, 7, one of the things 7 says, when we say humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, God answers that. He says, no sweat, I got it covered. Here's what I want you to do. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He's got it covered. The solution to that is right there. If you haven't made amends, you might be surprised at the response you get, regardless of what that person outside of you does. If you go into an amends with humility, with honesty, and with a desire to clear the wreckage of your past, you will get results. You won't have to carry those burdens. You don't have to carry around that guilt and shame. One of the things that I did with my 9th step, that I don't know if it's the way you're supposed to do it or not, but the way it worked out is I made this list in 8, and I kind of looked at it a while, and I said, nah, no way, and I put it up on the shelf. And on down the road, something from my past would start fucking with me. And it'd get to me. Where I'd run into someone, and go, I've learned that, or I don't know if I've learned that, my experience with the 9th step was I made the ones that were eating at my soul first. If you got something that is tearing you up inside, that comes up real regular, I suggest you do something about it if you don't want to feel that way. If you want to feel that way, go ahead. But if you don't like that, do something about it. Do what the program suggests. Make amends. I did that with all the real obvious ones. The other things on my list, the other people on my list, the other amends on my list were given to me. I didn't have to go out searching for them. God provided me the opportunities to make those amends. The one that I stumbled over the most, because I intellectualized the shit out of this program, was making amends to people that I had really hurt that were dead. And I went, how do I do that? I'm real grateful my sponsor at the time provided an answer that I could accept. Perhaps the greatest amends we can make is by changing the way we live. Being an addict is not an excuse for being an asshole. I am very concerned when I see us continue to live in the patterns that brought us here. And the reason I'm very concerned is because of this feeling I have for Narcotics Anonymous. You know, when we continue to do the things that we used to do out there using, we die. One of the things that we have in this program, probably one of the most important principles to me, is the principle of reciprocity. You might want to call it the law of retribution. You might want to call it what goes around comes around. You might want to call it what you sow, you reap. You might want to call it do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You can call it whatever you want. I call it the principle of reciprocity. And what it basically means to me today is that the way I live determines the way I live. If I'm raising hell, guess what I'm getting? You know, if I'm lashing out at you, you'll lash out at me, or at least defend yourself. If I don't trust you, how much do I think you trust me? How much can I expect you to trust me if I can't trust you? These things are all tied into the principle of reciprocity for me. It's become one of the most important things in my life. The 10th step. 10, 11, and 12, and I hate to admit this, have become really mainstays for me. I hated it when people said that, but those are the steps I am probably the most consciously aware of on a daily basis. You know, I told you way back that my head was the first thing that got up in the morning, and that's really true. I spend, and I'm getting ahead of myself, let me back up. The 10th step, I started talking about 11. The 10th step has become very, very important to me. The traditional way, the classic way that everybody looks at that is you sit down at the end of the day and you review your day and see if you made any mistakes, see if you live by these principles, see where you deviated from these principles, and you take care of it as soon as possible. Promptly admitted it when you're wrong. I'm sorry, that's not been good enough for me. The problem I have is that I can create a lot of wreckage in a day. To me, the 10th step's all about keeping the wreckage out of the present. I have to check myself out pretty continuously, and there's certain things I look for in my life. How much time am I spending seeking escape? What am I running away from? How's my contact with my higher power today? How's my relationship with you? Am I meeting you as an equal, or am I violating your anonymity? How's my orientation towards the world around me? Does today suck? One of the things I found out is that, you know, today doesn't suck. Today doesn't have the capacity to suck. It just is. You know, periodically my attitude sucks. It has nothing to do with the day or the weather or anything else or those outside things. I suck. Life's a bitch. Life's not a bitch. It doesn't give a shit. Sometimes I'm a bitch. My attitude is that of a bitch. You know, the problem's in here. I am the problem. You know, if I am not the problem, there is no solution. That's another good line. I'm the problem. You know, am I thinking off life's a bitch? If I am, I'm out of line. You know, if I'm focused on the negative, guess what? It's negative. If I can somehow focus on the positive, guess what? It's positive. What do I want? Positive or negative? I want positive. Okay. You have permission, Greg. Oh, okay. You know, it's funny. So many of us, we keep waiting for someone to give us permission to do what we know we're supposed to do. It never ceases to amaze me. Can I do something good? Sure, go ahead. Can I recover? Can I really work it? Go ahead. You don't need permission to recover. You don't need permission to live by spiritual principles. You don't need permission to be the best person you can be today.
Yeah. All right.
11th step, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. If you take away all the extra words, what that says is sought to improve contact, and it's real tough to improve something you haven't got. I suggest that you find a God before you start praying. At least find something you believe in. Find something you believe in. For me, and I know a lot of people might take difference to that, because one of the things that I've seen work for a lot of people is acting as if you believed in something and praying to nothing. And over a period of time, they came to believe. For me, I had to have something to believe in. What I believed in was whatever it was I saw working in you. I didn't know if it was going to work in me. But that's what I believed in, and that's what I prayed to. That point, that warm point of energy that I told you about a little earlier, that's where I focus my prayer and meditation. I pray through that spot, and I listen from that spot. I like to think of that as the God within, because I feel part of my belief system is that God exists within all of us, that God works through people, that God is both within and without, that God is everywhere. That's one of the reasons that I need you so much, because God works through you. And I spent a lot of years separating myself from you, and that was separating myself from God. And when I see a newcomer walk in the room, one of the things I used to do was, they ain't got nothing to say that I need to hear. Bullshit. God works through people, and He'll pick the damnedest people to work through. The people I would least expect to give me what I need are the people that give me what I need. The people who would seem to be the last person you ought to listen to. They'll sometimes say something so far beyond their awareness that you know it was meant for you. My response to talking is that if I can just remember this shit, everything might be okay. I get a tape and listen to it so I can hear what I say, because I know that I'm not in control of what I say. My experience is that I get up here and I blank out. And I'm liable to say any damn thing. And I'll listen back sometimes at a tape. I usually listen to a tape one time and take notes, because every time I talk, I say something I need to hear. I say something that I'm struggling with. I provide an answer that I'm struggling with. It's amazing. And every time you talk, if I have the courage, if I have the respect, and I define respect as the ability to recognize the God in someone, if I have the respect to listen to you, I will get the answer to my needs, to my problem, to my situation. The 11th step has become real important to me, and that's all part of that for me. Listening to you is meditation, because I never know when God's speaking through you and when He isn't. Giving of myself freely and communicating my prayers, like talking, is a form of prayer. The greatest prayer we can offer is the way we live. The 12th step has become very, 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 very important to me, because I think it describes the type of person I want to be. For me, that step describes recovery. Having had a spiritual awakening, a life based on an awakening of the Spirit, a rebirth, a new way, a letting go of that death we lived, An awakening of the Spirit. We try to carry this message to addicts. And that goes beyond just, telling your story and being nice to a dope fiend now and then. To me, that's the principle of giving. That I need to change from being a taker to a giver. Because I stole from life. Because I was a thief in the worst possible way. I stole physically, I stole emotionally, and I stole spiritually. And I need to become a giver physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Try to carry this message to addicts. Message is hope. The message is a new way of life. The message is the way I live. Don't tell me how good you're doing. It's easy to say this shit. It's tough to live this stuff. Show me by the way you live. Don't stand up in a meeting and say, everything's great, God's in charge of my life, and then, walk out the door and control the shit out of everything in your reality. It's a contradiction in terms. Don't say, God loves me and I see God in you, and go out after the meeting and punch somebody you're pissed off at. It's a contradiction. It's a contradiction in terms. And practice these principles in all our affairs. That's what I've been talking about. A life based on principle. A life based on letting go of Greg's way. A life based on letting go of that self-obsessed beast that I carried within me. A life based on something that works. Spiritual principles. Spiritual principles always work. Spiritual principles are never in contradiction. They don't depend on place, time, situation. They always work. They're like reciprocity. They're like trust. They're like hope. They're like faith. They're like honesty. If you're worried about what's God's will for you and you're trying to figure it out, you probably missed the point. I believe that God's will is ultimately very, very simple. Perhaps it's his 12th step. And I believe that God's will for me is to live life abundantly, to follow a spiritual path, and to give of myself along the way. Live life abundantly, follow a spiritual path, and give of myself along the way. That's the 12th step. The 12th step is God's will for me. If we can do that, and we can achieve something together that people have given their lives for throughout history. I started saying this in Chicago a few years ago, and I still believe it just as strongly, perhaps more strongly, and I usually end with it, is that we can change the world. We can make our lives count. We can make a difference in the world. We can make our lives mean something. And all we have to do is do what we're told in the 12 steps. That's all we have to do. Join me. I love you.